Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto left Konoha, created the Western Empire, and found love beyond the village? Yuki, Eva, Hinata, Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now start a fanfic. Jiraiya was standing up looking into the mirror and what light that was being shined from the weak light bulb as he tried to inspect the seal on his chest that wrapped around his body. Blasted seal, Jiraiya complained as he tried to access his chakra but could feel the seal instantly drain Jiraiya of it and give a burning sensation through his chest. Deciding he had enough information about its design and structure, he returned to the chair and desk and with the paper and pencil provided he began to draw a rough sketch of what he could see of the seal. It's defiantly an Uzumaki design. But it is of a different construct, but how did they get it? Jiraiya pondered as he slowly traced the pencil over the spiral he had drawn on the paper. Standing up and moving to the cell's edge and slightly peeking his head out, he found the guards down the end playing a card game. Perfect. Jiraiya smirked as he moved to the back corner of his cell. Well, here goes nothing. Gulping and forming the ram symbol, Jiraiya poked his fingers into his mouth and pushed against. Kai. He muttered as he could feel the seal in the back of his mouth release a small amount of chakra, just enough for the seal in his throat to activate before the main seal sucked it away. Here it was all Jiraiya thought before he vomited up a small toad in a black cloak. Before the toad could even make a sound, Jiraiya already had his hand around the toad's mouth. I'm sorry Fukusaku-sama, but I need you to listen and notice the area we are in, to which the small toad nodded as Jiraiya let go of his mouth. Jiraiya-chan, Fukusaku whispered, it seems to me that you were captured, no? To which Jiraiya could only shamefully nod. I see, the toad pondered as he hopped down from the table onto the floor. Well, guess I'll have to save the day once again. This time I hope it's not from a horde of angry women, or for that matter a village full of women you have angered, Fukusaku croaked as quietly and as humorously as he could. I assure you that it is not the case. Jiraiya spoke softly. He slowly looked around to ensure he was still alone, though I am a bit of a pickle, pointing to his chest. So Fukusaku, my entire chakra network has being sealed off and I don't have a clue how to unseal it nor how to combat it. Fukusaku squinted as he tried to view the seal in the poor light. I can't do anything about that, sorry Jiraiya-chan. Clapping his hands together he closed his eyes. Fukusaku then proceeded to hop towards the jail door. I will try and get the key to your cell door. For some reason I am unable to reverse summon, perhaps a seal within this prison. Just as Fukusaku was about to jump out of the cell, a cold voice rang out, you are not going anywhere. Jiraiya froze as he heard a voice he hadn't heard in a long time. Hello Kyufu. Stepping out of the shadows in the corridor, Jiraiya moved to the cell's door and tried to stick his head out, but the seal on his chest reacted to this action and caused him to pull it back in. Something Fukusaku took notice of. Jiraiya could only stare as he saw the figure finally step out into the available light, but Jiraiya knew in an instant who it was. Naruto. Both Fukusaku and Jiraiya spoke softly. Konoha 2 week after Jiraiya's capture. Tsunade was extremely worried. Jiraiya had missed his call-in message a week ago and now feared she had lost someone else dear to her heart. You stupid oaf. You better be just checking in late. I don't know what to do if you were gone too, she muttered to herself as she finished filling out paperwork. Looking over the village she saw the state it was in now. Where over 10 years ago when she took office, the village was full of life and prosperity, now the village was a former shadow of itself. A few days after the meeting with the daimyo, a civilian council member, one Hidemo Shikunji who was in charge of the market district, had gone against what Tsunade had ordered and told his little market council the truth of the meeting, and with that his fate was sealed. Once the market council had started to blab to the populace, they were all rounded up by the Anbu, but it was too late. It was discovered by Ibiki through his persuasive methods with a few of his visitors, how they learnt the secrets of the SSS rank meeting through Hidemo and his personal market council. Needless to say, they were all brought before Tsunade so she could go through with her promise and personally deliver the punishing blow. But the damage done by them was irreversible. The truth of Uzumaki's lineage spread like wildfire, and the typical reaction came. Just under half of the civilian populace outright denied the truth and demanded the immediate death should the demon ever return to the village. The other half, mainly the shinobi forces, were horrified that they had not only dishonored their beloved Yondaime Hokage, but they had allowed the civilians to abuse and torture their hero's only child. The final quarter of civilians in a small section of the shinobi forces could not live with the shame of what they did or allowed to happen to their hero's chid and simply chose to end their life. Tsunade was greatly saddened by this loss of unnecessary life, but was irrelevant, as once the other elemental nations found out it was as her Tokubetsu Jonin Mitarashi Anko put it, Konoha has being hit by a shitstorm, and furthermore Konoha lost its position among the other nations. The fire daimyo also lost his standing among the other daimyos and in retaliation taxed Konoha heavily. The civilian council were outraged about the additional taxes imposed on them, as it was their fault for how Naruto was treated through the years. Though Tsunade couldn't say it, she loved the reaction of the civilian council and the additional taxes owed by them. Though it was surprising to find some members of the civilian had used funds from accounts that were unknown to even those within Hi-no Kuni's taxation department, so once those who had hidden accounts outside Hi-no Kuni and were evading taxation were caught, were taxed even further. Though some managed to cover their tracks and not get caught. At Konoha's Kekai Han, nothing interesting was happening today, as Katetsu Hagane and Izumo Kamizuki and the rest of the Interception Division were currently playing cards. So boring. Katetsu sighed as he dropped 2 cards. Things were much more interesting when Naruto used to pull his pranks. The entire Interception team let out a chuckle as they all started to reflect on the orange-clad shinobi's pranks during his academy years. So think we will ever find him again? A branch Hyuga teammate asked as he dropped 3 cards. It would do great to see Lady Hinata smile again like the old days. It was no secret that Hyuga Hinata had a crush on the young Jinchuriki Uzumaki Naruto. When the village praised and thanked Kami that he was gone, Hinata fell into a depression until after a clan meeting a year after her attitude changed after rumors she murdered an elder in cold blood after he bad-mouthed Naruto and the young heiress's love and adoration of him. And ever since that day the young heiress had turned from the sweet kind-hearted girl to a cold and generally uncaring Hyuga princess and soon-to-be clan head. Only her team and those who treated Naruto as a real person she showed emotion. Something that the Hyuga's branch members truly missed and wished to return. Okay ladies, shall we finish this game? Izumo smirked as he looked over his cards. I'm feeling lucky today, he sang as everyone prepared to show their cards. Code Red, I repeat, Code Red, a detection member screamed, alerting the Interception team, who immediately jumped from their desk to the room. As the Interception team looked up to the floating ball of water resembling the seal around Konoha, they saw 4 spikes slowly begin to push into the water sensor sphere. 4 subjects approaching the village, 2 of them rank Jonin level. 1 Kage, and the other is Biju leveled. Screamed the robbed man. Could Naruto have returned? Everyone in the Interception team thought. Where are they headed? The Hyuga branch member asked as he activated his Byakugan to try and locate them himself. Targets are approaching the main gate. The robbed detection member seemed to ask himself. Estimated time of arrival, 25 minutes. Why are they taking so long? We better inform Hokage-sama, Katetsu said as he tapped Izumo's shoulder, and both made a break for the Hokage Tower while the other members split off and headed to the Anbu HQ to acquire reinforcements to follow and prepare for any situation. Hokage office. Tsunade was smiling as she finally finished signing off the final paperwork and had retrieved a clear glass bottle from between her cleavage. Personally bottled sake after a long day of work. Tsunade smiled as she slowly began to drink from it. Hokage-sama. Izumo screamed as he burst through the door, only to receive an empty bottle to the head. Tsunade-sama, I did warn him, Shizune said as she and Katetsu entered the room. Hokage-sama, we have come to report a code red from the Kekai Han. 4 individuals are approaching the village's main gate. Tsunade snorted, and why would that be considered a code red? She asked in disbelief. Azumo, who had gotten up, answered immediately, one of them has Biju level chakra. And with that Tsunade was up, could it be Naruto? She screamed as she ran past them and headed out of the building towards the front out of Tye. Just outside Konoha's main gate. It seems that Konoha has being alerted to our position, Walter spoke as he wiped his monocle and put it back on. So what do we do after we hand the scroll over? Asked a tall young man, only wearing a white trench coat with the kanji kyodai and fixing the straps on what appears to be a knuckle duster gauntlet. Simple, we find the strongest fighters in this pathetic village and have some fun. Spoke the taller companion, dressed in a black hakama and keiko gi and was wearing a white coat with the number 11 stitched on its back. But Ken-chan, I want to go to a hot spring and have some chocolate. A small pink-haired girl said as she bonked her fist on top of his head. Calm down Yakiru, we will get you a lot of chocolate, Ken-chan said as Yakiru began to squeal unhappily. Walter smiled at the interaction between Kenpachi and his adopted daughter. Turning his head, he could see Konoha's gates were only a few minutes away, and his eye narrowed at the now large formed group of Konoha's forces now stood at the ready at the gate with what Walter presumed to be the Hokage. This will be quite interesting, Walter said as he adjusted his monocle. Konoha's Pav. Tsunade stood hopeful at the village's main gate, praying to Kami Almighty that it was Naruto and perhaps some friends he made while he was gone and that he was coming home. Hitaki Kakashi stood alongside Tsunade, when he heard from a friend in Anbu that they were being deployed to a Biju-leveled person approaching the main gate with several other high-leveled members. He too hoped that it was Naruto. Out of all the shinobi shamed by their actions, he personally felt like he was the most dishonored. Being Minato's own student, he should have been there for Naruto when he was growing up, but he believed that once he was Naruto's sensei he could take better care of him. But the civilian council and the elders put a stop to that and convinced Kakashi he had to support Uchiha Sasuke and began to neglect not only Naruto but his other student Haruno Sakura, who had become a student under Tsunade for a while. A crowd slowly began to form of both civilian and shinobi, the shinobi because they were informed of the sudden deployment of Anbu, where the civilian were just curious as to why their Hokage, and a deployment of shinobi and Anbu at the front gate. The civilian and shinobi clan heads all stood with Tsunade and awaited the arrival of the four travelers. Back to normal Pav. It was a tense 5 minutes before the four travelers arrived at the front gate, and the Konoha group stood silently as the Hokage stepped forward, upset that Naruto wasn't with them but chose to welcome them anyway. Greetings travelers and welcome to Konohagakure. She offered her hand towards the man wearing a suit and a monocle. I thank you for meeting us Hokage-sama, I am Walter C. Dornez. To my left is Kenpachi Zaraki, leader of the 11th Legion, and his adopted daughter Yakiru Kusajishi. Kenpachi steps forward with Yakiru sitting on his shoulder. Grinning sadistically at Tsunade, he mocks a two-finger salute. Greetings, where Yakiru giggled and waved, hello pretty blonde lady. Tsunade nodded and greeted them back but was slightly confused. The 11th Legion, who in the elemental nations has a legion? Walter then moved his hand to his right, and to my right is the second in command of the Kyodai Battle Monk Division, known as Second Brother. Second simply waved his hand giving a casual hello. I don't mean to be disrespectful Walter-san, but may I ask why you are here? Tsunade inquired, utterly confused of who they were or why they are here. Oh yes, one moment Hokage-sama. Walter then pulled out a small scroll from his pouch. With both hands he passed it to the Hokage. She could see the intricate wax seal on the scroll and she knew in an instant it couldn't be good. Under the orders of His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor has ordered myself, Kenpachi, Yakiru and Second Brother to personally deliver this message for you from the Emperor himself, and to inform you that the one known in this village as the Gama Sennin, one of the Densetsu no Sanin known as Jiraiya, has been captured and is to be trialed for crimes against our empire. Walter smiled as he handed the scroll over to the shocked Hokage. WH, what for? And what proof do you have? Tsunade asked. Oh Kami, please let the a cruel prank and that you're okay Jiraiya, Tsunade was screaming in her head. The crowd gasped in shock. Jiraiya was seen as a legend, not for his ICHA publications but for his ability to sneak into places undetected and being unable to being captured, but to hear that not only had Jiraiya failed but was captured alive. Walter smiled slightly sadistically as he pulled out Jiraiya's forehead protector with the Myobokuzan symbol etched into it and several strands of white hair. Why for the attempted kidnapping of our empire's beloved hero Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto. And done. Again, my apologies for taking so long. I shall try having the next update in 2 to 3 weeks. Again, read and review. Took only a few minutes to relocate the entire council of Konoha and the newly arrived visitors from the front gates of Konoha into the private council chambers. Several Anbu and Junin had to provide crowd control, as some of the civilian and shinobi in the crowd were calling out and demanding that these thieving visitors return their precious Namikaze heir. As the guests entered the Hokage Tower and were being led to the East Tower and asked to wait until the council room was prepared for them, Walter was enjoyed taking his time to view of the many artwork pieces and literature written by past heroes, sages and cages of the village. Second brother simply chose to kick back and relax while fiddling with his knuckle duster gauntlet as he leaned against the wall. Yukiru was happily sitting on Ken-chan's shoulder devouring a box of chocolate that was given to her by Walter to behave herself until the meeting was over. Kenpachi was having a ball staring straight into the face of the Anbu with his one eye, daring them to challenge him as he leaked a little bit of his ki towards them. The Anbu, though were able to stand, found that their bodies were shaking. It was a short 5-minute wait until the council doors opened, and with a breath of relief from the guarding Anbu, that the group was permitted to enter and were seated in the middle of the room. With the shinobi sitting to the right side of them and the civilian and elders sitting on the left. With Tsunade sitting in front of them. Starting off the meeting, Tsunade stood up and gestured with her open arms. As the Godime Hokage Senju Tsunade, I welcome you all to our humble village, and firstly I would like to apologize for the actions of the civilians and some of my own shinobi for their choice of words while we walked here, and bowed respectfully towards the 4 visitors. And we thank you for allowing us entrance into your village, and do not fret about those comments from the people of your village, Walter replied back with a smile as he and the other 3 bowed before the Hokage. As the visitors and Tsunade finished bowing and returned to their seat, bar Tsunade and Walter, the 2 elders Homura and Kaharu stood up. Kaharu tapped her hand onto the desk and began to speak. We wish to know why has one of our beloved and strongest shinobis now imprisoned in your lands. After all, we elders and those of the council were not informed of Jiraiya being even sent out to your land. Both elders waited and noticed Walter had not even turned to acknowledge them. Hokage-sama, is it often that you have others speak on your behalf? Walter inquired to the Hokage without looking away from the Hokage. After all, as Walter then proceeded to take out the very same scroll he presented to her at the front gates of Konoha. This letter is addressed to you and you along, Hokage-sama. Walter then slowly moved around the table and handed the scroll to Tsunade directly. This is an outrage and insult. Homura shouted, trying to get Walter to look at them, but was angered greatly by the fact Walter kept smiling and he never gazed upon them. Within that scroll is the information you need to know about our visit, Hokage-sama, Walter said as he then returned to his seat and sat down, keeping his attention to Tsunade only. Tsunade nodded and took the scroll from Walter. Smirking mentally at the fact that the 2 old crones were not getting their desired attention, she opened the scroll slowly and was amazed, if not for the fact it was from an important letter, or notice from a foreign leader addressed to her specifically, she would have been amazed with the craftsmanship of the artwork bordering the parchment. She then coughed, getting everyone's attention as she began to read off the scroll. To Senju Tsunade, Godime Hokage * of Konohagakure * inhabiting Hai no Kuni. I write this letter on behalf of His Royal Majesty the Shadaime Kote * of the Western Empire. It is regret that I am to inform you that on the 25th of March, the shinobi that goes by the title Densetsu no Sanin Gama Shinobi Jiraiya was caught alive inside the royal palace after a failed stealth infiltration into the royal city and royal palace of Amaterasu. Under the laws of our empire and our interpretation of his action, This could be seen as an attempt on our emperor's life and therefore seen as an act of aggression that could lead to a state of war between our countries. Due to fact that Jiraiya had confessed his reason for entering our empire shortly after being captured, he was spared being immediate executed. The emperor is not without compassion and has deemed it acceptable for a lawful case to be held, with your village's best in political negotiations. A small guard detachment of no more than 6 with the 2 diplomats will be permitted from your village to go with our message deliverers to visit the royal city Amaterasu, where the emperor and his council will work towards hopefully a peaceful outcome. It is without saying that whilst visiting our city you will be kept under watch and any and all travel will be monitored. Furthermore, any attempts of contact with one Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto will be prohibited unless authorized by the emperor himself. If these negotiations prove to be fruitful for both parties, perhaps the emperor may visit the eastern nations for further diplomatic and possible trade negotiations. I personally hope that this incident shall be resolved peacefully and without complications. Written on behalf of the emperor. By Hachima, advisor to the emperor and member of the Inner Court Council. Placing down the scroll, Tsunade could only look over it with shock. They want us to send a team to represent Jiraiya in a criminal court case. She thought as the room filled with murmurs between council members while a few clan heads sat in silence. Are you serious? A voice rang out and all turned to see sitting on the shinobi side to see sitting somewhat arrogantly on his chair. It's obvious to see that Jiraiya only went to find that Baka of Adobe and bring him back home, not that it wouldn't matter. Uchiha-sama, need we remind you that you are not permitted at this time to voice any of your own personal opinions until the floor is open for discussion. Haruno Sayuri sweetly spoke out across the room to Sasuke, who only snorted and leaned back into his chair and ate a Pocky stick loudly. Tsunade could only glare at Uchiha Sasuke and the disrespect he was showing their guests. Walter smirked and adjusted his monocle and then his gloves. The child should know to be silent, and with a quick wave of his hand he gave him a very hard glare. And let the adults talk, you disrespectful little shit. Sasuke only glared at Walter and then watched in shock as his Pocky stick fell apart into very thin slices. How did he do that? Sasuke, though before his ears were assaulted by the one and only Hokage-sama, he is attacking Uchiha-sama, arrest him. Sayuri screeched whilst pointing at the Walter, resulting in all members in the room to cover their ears bar the 4 visitors. Oh, I didn't know Konoha had a tamed banshee as a civilian, second brother said with the utmost honesty one could have in their voice. Meanwhile in Konoha, a certain pink-haired kunoichi sneezed loudly. Oh, Sasuke-kun must be thinking about me, giggled Sakura as she walked down the street with her groceries in hand. Back in the council room, the room instantly fell into a state of stifled giggles and snorts, besides said screecher and Sasuke, who was glaring at Walter with his Sharingan activated. How dare you attack me? I am Uchiha Sasuke, elite shinobi of Konoha and the one to defeat Orochimaru. Walter just snorted and turned his attention back to Tsunade. Hokage-sama, we will permit you only 3 days to prepare your diplomatic team as we have a long journey ahead of us, Walter said, bowing to her before sitting down. Kaharu had enough and slammed both her hands down on the table. How dare you? First you attack Uchiha Sasuke, then you have the audacity to order our Hokage on what to do. And the most important is that you show no respect to the advisors of the Hokage. Second could only let out a light laugh. Respect. It's earned, not given, and by the Gaki told us, be lucky we aren't smashing your skulls. And the civilian, jerking his thumb to the civilian council side, in for how you had him live and treated for the 12 years he lived in this cesspool of a village. Walter smiled and nodded in appreciation towards second. And for your own satisfaction, elders, I was ordered by the Shidaime Kote * to only speak to the ruler of this village, which is Hokage-sama here. Whilst the advisors were fuming by what Walter and Second had said to them, knowing it was true though they would never admit it, there was one elder whose attention was fixed on the one-eyed visitor. The one called Kenpachi, who wasn't really paying attention to anyone but was his line of sight. Danzo mentally smirked. He was reported to have Biju-leveled chakra. Perhaps he can be a useful tool. Danzo thought as he slowly opened his right eye under his bandages and began to channel chakra into the stolen Sharingan. You will swear allegiance to myself and do my bidding until you are of no more use, he thought as he morphed the Sharingan into its Mangekyo form and began to cast Kodo Amatsukami * upon Kenpachi. In what seemed like an instant, Kenpachi gave a very feral grin as he stood up that seemed to tower over everyone. Kenpachi-san, are you alright? Walter asked as he looked at Kenpachi standing up with such a feral grin on his face and that look in his eye. Oh, this can't be good. Don't tell me, was what Walter able to think before Kenpachi flared his chakra and began to laugh, psychotically. Meanwhile in the Western Empire, have to wait till a bit later now to see what happens to Kenpachi or perhaps Konoha. Cheeky smiley face. It had been 2 weeks since Walter and his chosen group had departed for Hai no Kuni with only minor issues that could be left to the council to deal with. Naruto decided to have a day off and was walking around the palace in his casual outfit. I wonder what Ne-san and Ni-san are up to, Naruto muttered to himself as he walked down the corridors as he tried to forget the conversation he had with Jiraiya the first night he was locked up. Flash back to the meeting of Naruto and Jiraiya in the underground cells. Naruto. Jiraiya cried out, you're alive and okay. Thanked Kami. He grunted in pain as he tried to ignore the seal activating on his chest as he reached out and tried to reach Naruto and hug him but was just out of reach. What are you doing here, Kyufu? Don't you have a onsen in Hai no Kuni or Konoha to be spying on for your research? Naruto coldly asked. Jiraiya was shocked and fell back into the cell, whilst Fukasaku sat and watched from the shadows. What are you talking about, Naruto? Jiraiya asked, shock still evident in his voice. I've come to get you out of here and take you back home to Konoha. Standing up, he looked at his godson who only glared back at him with his piercing blue eyes. I messed up alright, Gaki. I should have been more observant that day in the sealing room, but I promise that I will make it up to you. I have so much to teach you, and of course I know how to give you back the ability to summon Toad again. Jiraiya said with a smile on his face. Looking at Naruto, he couldn't help but feel worried. The Naruto standing before him stood still. He wasn't showing any kind of emotion. Isn't that great, Naruto? Jiraiya said, worried. You can be just like you were before. Shut up. Naruto screamed, shocking Jiraiya to the floor once more. Do you think I want to go back there? Naruto asked, anger lacing his voice. And why would I want to go back with my Kyufu who left me alone in Konoha for the first 12 years of my life? Quote. Naruto took a step closer to the cell bars, who taught me with only the barest of instructions and left me on my own without any further assistance to go peep on women and spend my hard-earned ryo in those cheap whore houses. Taking another step closer, he watched as Jiraiya moved away. And who just sat back for a whole year before getting off his and actually look for me? Naruto all but yelled, flaring his chakra. Jiraiya could only sit there and look on in horror as Naruto tore him a new one and felt he was losing the little hyperactive boy he once knew. What happened to you, Naruto? Is it because the seal broke? And in that instant Naruto's blue eyes seemed to have darkened. Yeah, I did change once the seal broke. After all, I finally found out who my parents were after they appeared to repair the seal and asked why didn't my Kyufu look after me like you promised. Jiraiya's face dropped as he started to shed tears and to hide his shame-filled face. So Kyufu, are you going to tell me why you left me abandoned in Konoha for all those years and only took notice of me when? Naruto placed his hand over his stomach, when the biju sealed within me was threatened. After all, I wasn't guarded and trained like other hidden villages Jinchuriki after all. I had to try and learn by myself how to live in a village that was only happy to see me fall down and celebrated the day I was stolen. So tell me, Jiraiya, why should I keep calling you Kyoufu? Since you never did the one thing my parents Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina asked of you before I was born. Naruto's eyes began to glow red as he tapped into Kurama's rage-filled chakra as looked down onto the now crying Sannin Jiraiya. Naruto, calm down, you're pulling out my rage and hate-filled chakra, Kurama groaned within his seal as he returned to sleep. Naruto, though listening to Kurama and began to cut his use of the chakra, was still full of anger as he kept pressing his Kyufu. You should have seen their faces after they repaired the seal and asked what had happened to you, as the moment you put the Kuchio's no Keiyaku Fuin no Jutsu onto me, it damaged the Hake no Fuin Shiki and they couldn't see anything outside the seal. Oh, how fun it was to tell them of everything that happened after you sealed me and how that you had several chances to save me after that, but no, peeping on ladies at onsens were more fucking important for you. Naruto screamed before reaching in and pulling on Jiraiya's hair, bringing him face to face. And you know what they told me? They told me they regret ever making you my Kyoufu. Naruto threw him onto the floor and stepped back from the cell door and waited for his response. Hearing what Naruto just said, what Minato and Kushina told had said, Jiraiya just broke down and openly wept. He had failed a lot in life. He was continually rejected by Tsunade, the only woman he truly loved. He failed to save his best friend Orochimaru, and failed to protect his sensei and student, but now, this failure finally did what the others couldn't. It broke him inside, failing to live up to the expectations of the boy he called his surrogate son. Minato, Kushina, Naruto. Forgive me, please forgive me. Jiraiya screamed as he curled up into a ball and started crying his heart out. Jiraiya-chan. Fukasaku cried as he hopped over to Jiraiya and tried to help him. The Ogama Sennin never foresaw this. He saw redemption and forgiveness. Could he have been wrong? Fukasaku thought as he looked from Jiraiya to Naruto and saw the one thing Jiraiya couldn't see before Naruto turned around and walked off. Naruto was crying. Flashback end. Naruto shook his head and tried to repress the memory. Jiraiya's crying will forever haunt you until you can learn to forgive him, Naruto. Kurama's voice echoed through his mind as he arrived at his Nei-san's medical lab. Knocking on the, he waited till his Nei-san opened the door. Dressed in her white medical kimono coat, she smiled and ushered her Ototo as she finished up her latest medical experiment. So my kawaii Ototo? Yuki smirked as she watched Naruto's face twitch. Oh, how he hated being called that. What can Oni-sama do for you today, him? Yuki said as spun around on her workbench stool. The big block of glowing white blue ice. I just came to see what you are working on, Nei-chan. And what's with the glowing ice? Naruto asked as he pointed his finger at said ice cube. Yuki grinned as if she was given a shipping crate full of Pocky. This Ototo is from the northern ice fields. Thanks to your awesome Nei-chan summon contract, I was able to acquire this chakra-enriched ice, which will help me greatly in my Irio no Jutsu and with a few special surprises. Hehehehe. Yuki began to giggle as she petted said ice cube. That's right, I remember reading a report of you running through the northern gates screaming, I got it, after we had locked up the intruder, but surely it wasn't easy to get, was it? Naruto innocently asked. I mean, you didn't offer anything that you didn't own now, did you? Yuki smiled and nervously laughed. Oh no, Ototo-chan, I would never offer anything like I did last time. But I did offer Yami to settle the debt. Naruto just blinked at his Nei-chan, laughing nervously as she rubbed the back of her head. I don't know if Yami's gonna thank you or kill you for that, sis. Laughing it off, Yuki then took Naruto around her medical workshop, showing off some new medications she had made and some shinobi, samurai stimulants that could be used safely on field during combat. Oh, by the way, Nei-san, where's Nei-san? I wanted to ask if those repairs have been done yet. Yuki smiled and looked at her Ototo. Last thing he told me was he was hunting for a new ingredient for a new poison he was making. But that was since last week. Wonder what he is getting. Anyway, let's go grab some ramen. I'll buy you a bowl, Yuki said as she hung up her medical kimono coat and walked out with her Ototo. In the western forest, Yami grunted as he continued to climb up the waterfall, only wearing his shinobi pants, sandals and a collection bag. He used his hair to anchor into the waterfall's wall as he began to scrape off some residue and plant life that was growing there. Finally gotten the water root algae, Yami sighed in relief as he continued to climb up the rest of the way up the waterfall. After 15 minutes of looked out across the landscape and sighed as he saw the city of Amaterasu shining in the distance. To think that this land used to be ravaged by the horrors of war. Gently rubbing his eyes, he looked at his bag full of ingredients. I should really start having apprentices, or make Odoto teach me that Kage Bunshin no just and just let the clones do the work. Chuckling at his own joke, he sealed up his bag to make sure nothing would fall out. He stood up. Well, better get back home and start cooking up a storm. Stretching his back, if one was watching him, they would see Yami's body was covered in multiple scars. One distinct one could be the short 15 centimeters scar that ran across his solar plexus. Well, better take the express back down. Smirking, Yami bolted and jumped off the waterfall's edge and plummeted down. Before even reaching halfway, his hair shot out in multiple directions, latching onto anything to slow him down, and slowly crawled down the waterfall's face and lowered Yami onto the ground. Upon reaching the bottom of the waterfall, Yami just shook his head as his hair retracted into his ankle-long hairstyle. You're never gonna let me embrace the sweetness of death, are you? He said to no one in particular as he began jumping from tree to tree, headed back towards the city. Meanwhile, at Konoha's council room of doom, the shinobi council and the squad of Anbu guarding the room with the respectable elders and Tsunade were now watching Kenpachi as what they could only describe as golden chakra poured into the room. The civilian council had already passed out the moment Kenpachi had started flooding the room with his ki, as the rest in the room are trying their best to remain conscious. All right, WHO did it. Kenpachi screamed, grinned like a madman as he slowly moved his hand onto his katana. WHO dares challenge me to a fight. As his chakra and ki began to fill the room up. What power, was the thought that every trained shinobi thought in the room that was still conscious as they could feel the pressure from the chakra seemingly wanting to push them against the wall and explode out of the room. What happened? He should be under my control. Danzo seethed in thought as he quickly cut off the chakra connection to Shisui's Sharingan and closed his eye. Kodo Amatsukami lets me go into anyone's mind and do as I say, so why isn't he? Danzo thought as he began to join what everyone else who was still conscious was doing, backing away from Kenpachi and pressing themselves against the wall. What is going on? Tsunade screamed, part in frustration for the sudden show of violence and part in horror as she had never experienced someone build up their chakra and ki so fast. She struggled to remain conscious as the chakra and ki Kenpachi was releasing seemed to be filling up the room and one would say crushing them under it. Then without warning, the ceiling and roof of the room gave way to the chakra pressure Kenpachi was giving and simply blew away, letting the entire village not only see and feel the maliciousness of the chakra which grew past the Hokage monument in height to which many civilians, genin and few chunin passed out from, but the whole village got to hear his insane laugh. Walter stood still, unaffected by Kenpachi's sudden explosion of chakra, and simply fixed his monocle as he turned to Tsunade. I'm afraid someone in the room has challenged Kenpachi to a fight. Tsunade looked in disbelief as Kenpachi slowly drew out his worn down and what one could say badly chipped katana. My assumption is that by someone trying to cast a genjutsu on him. Walter finished speaking to Tsunade and turned to the maniacally laughing Kenpachi. Pulling out a scroll, Walter wiggled it in front of him. Kenpachi, remember what Naruto said about our visit? Kenpachi's laughter stopped, but his chakra still burnt strong around his body. The little Gaki promised me a good fight when we get back home, Kenpachi replied as he glared his one eye at Walter. Very good, Kenpachi-san, but do you remember the agreement you signed with young Uzumaki-sama? Walter smiled as he held the scroll in front of Kenpachi. To what seemed like an eternity to everyone else still conscious in the room, but was only a good 20 seconds, Kenpachi stopped flaring his chakra and ki and snatched the scroll from Walter. You're no fun, Walter. Kenpachi groaned as he took his seat and waited. The remaining conscious council members were flabbergasted as Kenpachi's sudden rampage simply stopped. Geez, Ken-chan. Did you have to ruin my chocolate time? Yukiru screamed and began banging her sheathed katana against Kenpachi's head, who only groaned in annoyance as a reply. Walter hurried over to Tsunade and bowed before her. I'm sorry, Hokage-sama, for the damage caused by Kenpachi, but without the Shadaime Kote here or Uzumaki-sama calming down Kenpachi is near impossible. It's only fortunate that Uzumaki-sama was able to make a deal with Kenpachi, offering to help Tsunade up. He smiled. After being helped up by Walter, Then her Anbu squad Tsunade called for a recess to the meeting until tomorrow and to inform the village that everything was under control. Out of all the people in the room, only 2 people were outraged by the show of power. Danzo for his inability to control Kenpachi with his Koto Amatsukami. It seems I will have to go and see if the implant is wearing off. My Koto Amatsukami has never failed me before, he thought to himself as he left the tower to his personal residence. The second was Uchiha Sasuke. How dare someone have power that exceeds my own? All power like that should belong to the Uchiha automatically. I have to find out how he is so strong. As he headed off to his clan compound to figure out a plan to find out how to get the same power for himself. Walter, second brother, Kenpachi and Yakiru walked through the streets to which everyone basically cleared the streets for, so Walti-san. Where are we staying tonight? Yakiru happily cheered from Kenpachi's shoulder. I wanna go somewhere where there is a onsen. Walter smiled to the young girl. Of course Yakiru. However, with the sudden rush into the village and into the meeting, we were not shown where the accommodation is available in this village. Then again, with Kenpachi-san's actions, it may prove to be difficult, Walter said as he rested a finger on his chin, thinking as he walked along. Perhaps I can be of assistance if you myself in answering some questions, spoke a feminine voice. Turning around, they saw a young lady in a very expensive kimono, her midnight blue hair hanging over her shoulders, the yin and yang symbol proudly shown on her kimono, but what caught everyone's attention was her lavender-white pupil-less eyes that seemed rather cold. Walter smiled. He knew who this girl was instantly, Lady Hyuga Hinata, I presume. Giving a deep bow to her, it is truly an honor to be approached by the heir to the noble Hyuga clan, Walter replied as the others gave their respects bow. If I may ask, how can you? Hinata only looked over them, slowly walking up to Walter before coldly stating, everything you can tell me about Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto, they stuff you wouldn't tell the Hokage about. And cut laughing face. Well, again, I do hope I give you what you're expecting. And expect a new story by Sunday next week. I gotta get back into my story writing. The real world and its problems have been pushing me down too much lately. Other than that, I must say the current manga keeps getting interesting, doesn't it? Oh, and I do hope someone is able to crack what bloodline my OC Kurakawa Yami has. Cheeky smiley face. I am now going to give subtle hints at what it could be. When will you see it in action? Well, perhaps in a flashback. Or perhaps when the Emperor tours the Eastern nations. Guess you will have to wait. Also, next chapter, keep an eye out for my first attempt at an omake. Cheers, and remember, give me a review. It helps me hear from you guys and gals what you like, don't like, and what ideas you have to how my story is being played. Walter smiled towards the emotionless Lady Hyuga Hinata. Of course, Hinata-sama, but we can only tell what we are permitted to, of course. We do not want to get further into trouble with this village, Walter said with a sweat drop as he turned his gaze to the Hokage Tower, where the structure to the left of the tower was undergoing emergency repairs. Hinata kept her cold glare on the travelers for a moment until raising her left hand. In an instant, 4 Anbu-dressed Hyuga guards appeared with their heads down before Hinata. Hijioku-san, please have the VIP guest room prepared for our 4 Western delegates. They will be residing there until they are ready to leave, and do remind the elders that they are not permitted to interfere in any way, Hinata coldly said with authority. The 4 Hyuga guards all complied and disappeared. Your guest room will be ready by the time I take you to the Hyuga estate. In the meantime, would you care to join me for lunch? Hinata said as she turned and walked down the street. Second brother whistled softly. Damn, she's cold as ice. Wonder what happened to the girl Naruto once knew. The other 3 nodded before following behind Hinata. Hokage's corridor leading to Hokage's office. This is an outrage, Tsunade-san. Homura and Kaharu ranted and screamed about how the visitors had not only ignored their position but also that the one called Kenpachi had caused so much damage. We demand you make an example of them and demand the Emperor give us compensation for the damage. Tsunade finally had it and spun around, grabbing them by their wrinkled throats, lifted them and smashed them against the wall. Would you both shut the fuck up and look at the bigger picture? She screamed all but in their face. You both should be worrying more about WHO casted the genjutsu in the meeting room where no jutsus can be used. Dropping them down, Tsunade stormed down to her office door and opened it, and stood there in shock. Kakashi, what are you doing here? Standing in her office, travel pack resting against his leg, and his attention is always focused on his Ika tactics. Oh Hokage-sama, I was just waiting for the files on team selections for those who are going to the Western Empire. Tsunade stood there, absolutely horrified. Kakashi, you are a day early. Running to her desk, she checked the results of the daimyo lottery. Not finding what she wanted to see, she spun around to the window and began to look up into the sky. Kakashi's sweat dropped. Hokage-sama, what are you looking for? This is surely a sign of the apocalypse. You're a day early. Tsunade screamed. Meanwhile, in the Western Empire, Naruto was enjoying his walk through his garden, debating on how to approach the situation with Jiraiya. Stopping, Naruto felt an ice-cold shiver run down his spine before his body shiver violently. Looking up to the sky with horror, he quickly bolted back inside the palace. Several Fox agents appeared and ran over to their emperor and surrounded him in a protective formation. Your Highness, are you all right? One of the agents asked. I don't know, Naruto said while shivering in the corner of the room. I feel like something that shouldn't be has been. The Fox agents were stupefied as to why their emperor was acting like this. Back in Konoha's market district, Hinata walked down the main market street. Both civilians and shinobi alike moved out of her way as she passed them, with only the elderly and shinobi bowing their heads to Hinata's clan status. After a few minutes, Hinata finally reached her destination, Ichiraku Ramen. After the civilian council managed to null and void the third Hokage's law, the civilian population of Konoha started to not only openly curse Naruto as the Kyuubi incarnate, but they began to attack both verbally and physically anyone who supported Naruto, and of course the older generation continued to poison the minds of the younger generation. Pulling back the Norin, she let out one of her rare smiles to the couple running the store. Ayame-san, Ichiraku-san, it is wonderful to see you both again, Hinata spoke as she took her seat. Ah, welcome Hinata-san. Ayame smiled warmly and moved forward to the counter. And how can I? Ayame froze up on the spot as Kenpachi lifted the Norin and, slightly, hunching over, entered and grinned. Well, hello there. Ken-chan, don't scare the pretty lady. Yukiru screamed as she slammed her pink-sheathed katana against Kenpachi's head before jumping off his shoulder and taking a seat and smiling at Ayame. I'm hungry, she shouted happily. Ichiraku had walked in just as Yukiru started bashing Kenpachi's head and stood there shocked. My deepest apologies to you both, Walter said with a bow as he entered the stall. Kenpachi is easily forgetful of his appearance when meeting new people, smiling warmly to the chef. Ah hee hee. That's okay, totally understandable, I think, Ichiraku said as he watched the three men take their seats, or the two take their seat and the tall one squatting down. After their orders were taken, Hinata turned back to Walter and her emotionless face returned. So tell me, Walter-san, before you answer any questions of mine, is there anything you would like to ask me? Within reason, of course, keeping her lavender-tinted white eyes locked onto Walter's. Smiling towards Lady Hinata, Walter nodded. The only question I can ask is why are you this? How can I say it, emotionless? As Uzumaki-sama told us, you were a very kind-hearted girl. Hinata glared at Walter before reaching into her kimono and pulling out a small green crystal. It started the day Naruto was first kidnapped. Flashback time, laughing face. The day Naruto was kidnapped for the first time. Hinata, Shino with their injured teammates Kiba and Akamaru were sitting together at the green tea house. While Kiba, who was only discharged from the hospital a day ago, was able to walk around slowly while carrying Akamaru, and Shino silently sulked that he was not able to go along with the retrieval team, were more concerned about Hinata as Naruto had being locked up in the hospital and was to receive no visitors until he was cleared. Naruto-kun wasn't hurt too badly, was he, Kiba-kun? Hinata asked as she held her teacup. I don't know, Hinata. Whenever I ask the nurses and doctors, they just glare at me and told me that they were not allowed to say and told me to forget about him." Kiba looked down at his teacup confused. It seems illogical that the staff at the hospital would react in such a way asking about a fellow shinobi's condition. Perhaps there is something that we aren't informed of yet, Shino said before taking a drink from his tea. Hinata looked down into her cup of tea. "Naruto-kun, I know you're going to be okay. Nothing ever holds you down." Looking up from her tea to the main gate, she blinked in surprise as she saw two people appear, one tall man and a woman, but it was the person draped over the man's shoulder as they ran out of the gate. Naruto-kun. Hinata screamed as she jumped up and ran towards the gate with Shino following closely behind, where Kiba sat there stupefied. Hinata only managed to travel at least 10 meters before being stopped by a couple of chunin. "Don't worry, Hyuga-sama. We are awaiting reinforcements to pursue the kidnappers." The chunin smiled at Hinata as the other chunin looked at the fleeing figures with Naruto on the tall one's shoulder. "Good riddance to the demon," the second chunin muttered under his breath that was heard by Shino. "What do you mean, demon shinobi-san?" Moving in front of the chunin, Shino stared right into his eyes. "Uzumaki Naruto is a fellow shinobi of Konoha, and we are taught that together we are strongest. It's illogical to understand why you refer to him as a demon. Please tell us why." As Shino spoke to the shinobi, "Hirote, shut up. You know it's forbidden." The chunin screamed, looking around worried. "Tch, I know, Jusen." Hirote snapped back. "A genin like you would never understand the danger that is that demon." Shino glared through his glasses, mind you, at the chunin named Hirote as his kikaichu started to buzzing angrily inside him at the comments. What do they mean? If only we knew. He thought as a squad of Anbu suddenly shot past the group. "All looks like everything's under control now," Jusen said, trying to calm the situation as he stepped between Shino and Hirote. "I think you better take Lady Hyuga, she doesn't look too well." Shino turned to Hinata and was shocked to see her wide-eyed and trembling. "He isn't a demon," she muttered over and over as Shino calmly placed a hand on her shoulder. "He is indeed not a demon, Hinata. Now let us go back home," Shino encouraged as he gently led Hinata away from the gate. "Do not worry, Hinata. I am sure that Naruto will be rescued and the kidnappers apprehended." Sitting Hinata down on a bench near the front gate. "If you like to, Hinata, Shino, Akamaru and I will sit with you here until you are required to go home," Kiba said as he walked up slowly with Akamaru in his arms. "Thank you," Hinata mumbled as she sat down with her teammates and waited. Flashback 1 ended. Hinata slowly ate the ramen that was in front and continued her story. "Though I was not present when Naruto did return on his own free will and was kept locked with the main family members when the shinobi and kunoichi forced their way into the village by the summoned gorilla, a week after Tsunade-sama's condition was made known to the shinobi forces and clan heads." Flashback 2 begin. Cheeky smiley face. That night at the Hyuga compound's clan meeting room, Hinata sat next to her father as he and the clan elders began their emergency clan meeting. She didn't want to be there, but she didn't want the elders to use her absence as a means to continuously demean her position as heiress. Furthermore, Hiyashi, with the recent events we should solidify our standing position as the most powerful clan in Konoha and not aid in the demon's recovery. An elder by the name of Urajiri called out. "The Hyuga clan is one of the most powerful clans within Konoha, and to stand back and do nothing will result in our downfall." Another elder shouted back as Hiyashi sighed and rubbed his temples. "Damn these idiotic elders," he thought to himself as he watched the elders scream back and forth. Looking down to his sides, he saw his second-born daughter and heir to the clan, Hanabi, sitting attentively even though he could tell she was trying her best to not break face. "She will be a fine clan head," he thought to himself. Turning to his firstborn, he mentally sighed as he saw she had her head down and was clenching the legging of her kimono tightly in her hands. "Where did I go wrong with you?" he thought neutrally. Sure, Hiyashi saw over her squad reports and saw that she was improving greatly, but it wasn't enough in his opinion, and to make things worse, she had fallen into a depression when she was informed that the boy she had a silly crush on had been rescued by those kidnappers. If she doesn't improve, the elders will have the material they need to brand her. Frowning slightly to that thought, he turned back to the screaming elders and called for silence, but before he could speak when the room went silent. Hiyashi, you know what we must do. We must not aid in the recovery of that damn demon. Urajiri screamed to Hiyashi, it is better outside Konoha. The only way the Hyuga would is to kill it. Hiyashi frowned at the elder, holding his hand up for silence. He was about to speak. Hinata spoke for the first time in any of the Hyuga meetings she had attended. Naruto-kun is not a demon, she said in a soft but neutral tone. The room was dead silent and Hiyashi was shocked silent as he turned to his daughter. What was that, you failure of a heir? What did you dare say to me? Urajiri screamed as he rose from his kneeling position and advanced towards Hinata to kneel in front of her and scream directly at her. Hinata, without lifting her head, said again, Naruto-kun is not a demon, you are. Urajiri's face turned bright red as he prepared to scream. Then a sickening smile spread as he gleefully spoke. I would simply love to get the demon and bring him before you. After all, the whole clan know of your infatuation with that demon. You would dishonor our powerful and noble clan. Well, I shall fix that by finding him, bringing him before you, and, leaning down so his mouth was right next to her ear and spoke with such venom so all could hear, I will rip out its heart and blow his brains out with a jukin to the head. The whole room gasped in horror as what Urajiri said. Hanabi covered her mouth with her hands, both horrified by what the loving elder had said to her older sister. Hiyashi was stunned. How dare he speak to her like that? He thought as his Hyuga blank face cracked but remained silent for the moment. He wanted to see what Hinata would do as he held a small amount of pride in seeing her stand up for her own belief. If one were to see Hinata's face, they would see the sweet innocent girl replaced by a neutral and face with eyes filled with rage and sadness, and with a neutral voice she spoke into Urajiri's offering ear. Don't worry, I can kill the demon myself, she spoke, her voice full of venom for the first time. Urajiri smiled, thinking he had finally broken the girl, but suddenly, he felt the inside of his chest suddenly scream in pain as he spewed blood from his mouth. Looking down, he was horrified to see Hinata's hand placed over his heart, and without a chance to move or retaliate, his eyes rolled into the back of his head and he fell down beside her. Hinata remained kneeling there, the blood of the elder staining her white Hyuga kimono, looking around the room to see the reaction of the present elders, and felt something she never felt before. Was it pleased? She thought as she saw that everyone in the room looked at her horrified. Turning to her father and sister, she saw her little sister Hanabi both horrified and crying as she held onto her father's robes. Hiyashi was once again left without words and scared of how cold and callous she had acted, but deep within he was proud, disappointed of what she did of course, but still proud. Father, Hinata spoke neutrally, you will aid the Hokage and show that we are a loyal clan to Konoha, want you? She said before standing up and leaving the quiet room. Flashback 2 ended. Hinata looked up from her bowl of ramen and towards her guests, and saw that not one of them seemed repulsed by what she had just said. Pretty lady stood up for Naruto Ni-chan. She should get a medal. Yukiru screamed happily as she finished off the broth in her bowl of ramen. Walter smiled towards Lady Hinata, both his bowl and chopsticks somehow immaculately cleaned. Well, that does explain quite a lot, Lady Hyuga. Seeing as how you have finished your story, there is but one slight question I would like to ask. Hinata turned and glared at Walter, but all he did was smile at her, and this one comes straight from Uzumaki-sama. Hinata froze and her emotionless face broke with a light blush across her cheeks. Nah. Naruto-kun has a question for me. Hinata asked in true disbelief. Yes, Lady Hyuga. He asks if his most precious person is still hold on to his most cherished treasure. Hinata blinked shocked and placed her hand over her heart. Walter smiled at this action. I shall take that as a yes. Standing up and pulling out a scroll, he placed it onto the counter. Sir Tenchu and Lady Ayame, this scroll is for you both by Uzumaki-sama, and this, putting his hand into his pouch and pulling out a small bag, should cover his IOU with interest. The chief and daughter were shocked and gratefully accepted the scroll and bag, and began preparations to close up shop. Well, Lady Hyuga, second brother said as he took out a travel flask from his coat and took a swig from it, If it is allowed, I would like to see where we will be sleeping tonight. Walter turned with a sharp eye to second brother, who simply shrugged it off and took another swig. Kenpachi managed to get out of the stand without breaking anything with a now sleepy Yakiru on his shoulder. Ken-chan. I wanna go sleepy, she muttered as she rubbed her eye. Sure. This way, Hinata said as she tried to compose herself back to her emotionless self while her heart was doing backflips and beating harder than it ever had. It should be noted that Tenchu Ichiraku and his daughter, after closing shop and returning home to read the letter and later admitted themselves to hospital, is when they opened the small pouch, outpoured various gems and gold nuggets. Already Tenchu had plans to expand his influence, expand his business to the west, yes. The Western Empire Imperial Palace. A day after Yami returned from ingredient gathering, Yuki was running around the palace checking every room she could. Damn it, Yami, where are you? She screamed. Yami had promised me my custom item would be finished today. She ranted in thought as she checked room to room. After a good 4 hours, she gave up and returned back to Yami's workshop and began to look for her custom gear. Come on, it's got to be around here somewhere, Yuki muttered to herself as she moved various bandaged items and other weapons and gear. It will be done tomorrow morning and polished for you, he said. It will be the greatest creation I've made for you yet, he said. She froze as she came across Yami's work calendar and saw the date that was marked with, the day I lost my humanity. Why would you go back there again, unless? Her eyes widened in horror as she turned and bolted out of his workshop. Itoko-kun, where are you? She screamed as she looked for her cousin. Unknown location. Yami stood in the now darkened corridor of Laboratory 10, a sight which during the Unification War still haunted him to this day. If one were to light up the area, they would see remains of a horrific battle that took place. White bones and red blood stains still remained in this sealed-off facility. I should have died that day, Yami spoke to himself as he walked down the corridor. Walking down the corridor in various connecting rooms brought horrific flashbacks for Yami, the screams, the pleading, the innocent who were begging for death, and the hollowed laughter of Zoran and his encounter with her. Fucking genjutsu bitch, Yami groaned as he turned around the corner to find Zoran's scythe still embedded into the ceiling, a bone-white hand and forearm still clenching onto it. Yami stood there for what felt like an eternity looking at the arm and remembering that horrible day. You can come out now, Yuki, Yami sighed but kept his eyes on that black scythe. You know Naruto has forbidden you to come here, Yami, Yuki said as she walked out of the shadows and behind Yami and placed a hand on his back. It's getting worse, isn't it? She asked, with sadness in her voice. If the seals hold, I have probably 5 to 8 months, Yami said with a dead voice. It's fucking funny, isn't it? 6 years into the war we came here, on this day to stop Nobunaga's experimentations and sniff if I wasn't so fucking careless. Dropping to his knees, he began to hit the floor, letting out a string of curses to Nobunaga, Zoran and the almighty Kami. If I didn't come, it would not have awoken. And I wouldn't be in this situation. Yami screamed out his pain and frustration. After a moment of silence, Yuki stood beside her friend and saw how broken he was. Yami turned his head and looked up to his best friend, his only friend that he would show these moments of weakness to. Not ever Naruto, who he considered a brother in all but blood, had ever seen him this broken. Is there a way to stop it? Yuki asked, her voice soft and fragile, seeing her best friend this broken. There is, but it means I have to return to Kusa. If I don't go back to my clan home and finish the initiation and control technique. Yami held himself as fresh tears rolled down his face. I don't want to turn again. I don't want it controlling me again. I don't want to give up my humanity again and feast on. It was there that Yuki pulled Yami around and delivered a chakra-powered slap across his face. Unseen to them both, a small pebble rolled away from Yami's armor joint. Don't ever say that again. It wasn't your fault for what happened. Kneeling down and hugging her giant of a friend, she cried as she looked him dead into the eye, poison green eyes locking on with her cold steel eyes as tears both ran down their faces. No one blames you for what happened that day, Yami. You didn't feast in anything. It woke up and it feasted. The Creed have long ago forgive you for what happened to their Grand Master. Yami, you are not the monster, just like how our Ototo is not the Kyuubi incarnate, like how Konoha treated him. Yami began to cry again as he wrapped his hands around Yuki and pulled her in for a hug, and incoherently muttered, "Thank you," over and over again. Together they sat there and cried while two figures watched over them. After a good half hour the taller of the two grunted, "Kid, it's time to go back before the Gaki realizes we are gone." The taller man turned, revealing a very long and familiar sword. The second seemed to bow from the shadows. "We must move swiftly," Seisei-sama and Yuki Onichan, in a somewhat feminine voice. "Sure. Open up a return mirror, would you please, Itoko-kun," Yuki replied as she helped her best friend back on his feet, who before leaving gave one last glance in the hallway and turned to the three of them. "Yes, it's time to return and plan what to do next, and you have to stop calling me that," Yami grunted as he and everyone stepped into the ice blue mirror, which broke apart and disappeared when they all entered it. It was a good 15 minutes before Pebble rolled back into the light, and with a puff of smoke, Naruto stood there and he too looked at the scythe in the ceiling. "You're always going to be my brother no matter what, Yami," he said with a tear rolling down his face, and he remembered that horrible day and poofing away, ensuring that the original would have a flashback of what once happened here. Exclamation mark. Chapter end. Author's notes. Well, finally got around to posting this chapter. Yeah, I know, kinda had too much on my plate after coming home from the bushfire evacuation. Mostly personal issues I won't discuss. That, and I had a writer's block on what I had typed so far. I want to thank everyone who messaged me, through reviews and in my inbox, for the kind words and safe prayers for my safety during the bushfires here in NSW. It has touched me greatly that so many people took the time to wish not only me luck but everyone affected here in the Blue Mountains. I thank you all. Now for some delightful info, laughing face. I hope to have the next chapter done by the end of February. As I'm currently job hunting and it's not being easy for me. Here's hoping I can find a job soon. And from the next chapter on to the chapter where Yami and Sasuke will have a match in Konoha, part of the Emperor's visit to Konoha now. 3. Will I be giving subtle hints of what Yami's Kekkei Genkai is and what else he holds? Giggles insanely. Now on to Zorin. As some of you might know, she is a character from the Hellsing Ultimate anime. After watching the series while trying to kickstart some ideas in my head, I found her to be quite the interesting character, and someone I would like to put in the story of the Unification Wars to show how blood-hungry and demonic the leader of the Western continent Nobunaga is. Zorin from Hellsing. I plan to work on her character into the story, so we all see where that leads us to. And yes, Yami's home village is revealed to be Kusagaker. Anyways, I shall leave you with the time now to click that review button, leave a awesome review for me. And who knows? Maybe if someone hints closely to what Yami might have, or give random guesses and get close to what his Kekkei Genkai is, I might reward you with something in story, hehehehe. And I really gotta make that omake